You know, streaming gets more popular every day, and why not? Streaming makes listening to music fun and easy. And one of the best sounding streaming companies on the market is HiFi Rose. I'm Joe with Gramophone, and today we're lucky enough to be with Woody Compton, who is with MoFi Distribution, who distributes HiFi Rose here in the U.S. How are you, Woody?
Great. Anytime I'm hanging out with Joe, it's good.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's great seeing you again. Thank you so much for coming down to talk about some of the new products that you guys have out. And really, the first thing I want to talk about is we've had a ton of success with HiFi Rose in general, but in particular, the RS150B. And maybe you can share with our viewers some of the things about the 150B that makes it such a winning product.
Well, the thing that a lot of people really like about it is that it has an interface that makes it seem very consumer friendly and very touchable and something you want to interact with. A lot of the high-end streamers out there, some of them are just a black box and they have no display of any sort. You can't see what the cover art is. It's all done through an app. And because of that, there's not a lot of pride in ownership. You don't necessarily put it on the top of your rack. It's something you hide. And the Rose units, because of that, they're very approachable. And like at home, I use the app most of the time, but my wife likes the front panel interface because it's like her iPhone.
Yep.
She finds that very easy to use. But you know, if you make something that's easy to use, that's one thing. But they're also very high performance units. So the company designs their products to be high performance, but very easy to use for an end user and something that they want to interface with. So, you know, between the really custom-made power supplies that HiFi Rose makes for all their units, the very high-quality DACs they use, and the femto clocks, they've really designed an audiophile component. But they've added a lot of features to it that I think it's not just a streamer. Right. Like the fact that you can do YouTube videos without commercials, and it has internal storage. You know, if you add a CD ripper, you can rip CDs to the unit and put them on the internal storage. There are features like that that a lot of streamers don't have that make it so feature-rich that the audiophile performance, yes, that's something you want, but having all these other features, that's some of the fun part.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head with the front panel ease of use, because we're all doing this with our phones these days, and the fact that you can manage really all your digital content. Like you say, you can literally rip your whole CD collection if you want to into the unit. You can manage everything in one stop. And from a performance point of view, we're really impressed by, again, the 150B. It's not inexpensive at $49.95, but there are streamers that are at much higher prices that don't really seem to offer that much more from a sonic perspective than this one does. So even a 150B at that price, I think, is really very, very compelling with all the things it does.
Absolutely. And I think some people will use features on there that they didn't even think they knew they wanted. Like the RoseTube function, which is on all of our streamers. It's interesting to note that more people listen to music on YouTube than anywhere else, than any other streaming service. And the RoseTube functionality allows you to use that, but it prioritizes music in the search, and it prioritizes it by the better sounding and looking videos, but it also doesn't have any commercials. So if you want to watch a concert, you can watch a 2-hour concert and you don't have that commercial in the beginning, you don't get those breaks every 20 minutes, and it's a real pleasure to just sit there and find things that aren't even commercially available anymore.
Yeah.
And you could really go down the rabbit hole if you're a big fan of a band. Just type in the name of the band and you might be up all night, grab some coffee, because there's so much content available.
RoseTube is a huge feature, and there is a specific Springsteen song, Prove It All Night, that during that tour, they did this long extended version of it that is, I think, one of the peak moments in rock and roll history, but they didn't play that longer version in subsequent tours. You can go on YouTube, find, you know, that about 10.5 minutes long, Passaic, New Jersey. So Prove It All Night Live, Passaic, New Jersey. It's phenomenal. And is the video quality as great as you'd like, or the audio quality? Not really, but as you say, RoseTube prioritizes the highest res version of anything that you have searched for. So I think that's a great way to say it, is you may find that there are features in the HiFi Rose products that you wind up using that you didn't even know you were going to wind up using.
Yeah.
Right, so there's all of that. And having said that, now we have a new product that actually even supersedes the 150B. It's called the 130. And I think one of the things that our reviewers, our customers really want to know is, well, the 150B is just a few $100s less than the 130. The 130 doesn't have a DAC. So what is it exactly that we're getting with the 130 that makes it an even better bet than the 150? And that's what we'd like to dig into a little bit today. So if we can start talking about some of those features, that'd be great.
Sure. When you're talking about high-end components, basically separating the boxes for anything is better. Like if you start out with a turntable as a built-in phono stage, it's not going to be as good as getting a separate phono stage. If you have an integrated amplifier, it's not going to be as good as a pair of separates. We have a preamp and a power amp. Anytime you have separate power cords, separate power supplies, separate chassis, and separate boxes designed just to do their job, it's always better. It's very rare that you hear an all-in-one box solution that's better than separates. So, you know, they had CD transports where they would just have the CD spinner that would spit out the zeros and ones, go into a DAC, go into your preamp, and they sounded better typically than a CD player, because again, it was optimized for that job. The RS130 is just optimized for taking that Ethernet and converting it to zeros and ones. So all the money you're spending is going into doing that. So it's going to be extremely well built with excellent power supplies, very heavy chassis, well damped, and it also has a really cool feature that you guys are using because you're smart, is the SFP module in the back can accept a fiber optic input. And this is one of those interesting tweaks that I was kind of surprised by, because when I got the RS130, I thought it sounded great. It sounded better than another streamer I had that was a few $1,000s more. And I was really enjoying it. And I talked to one of my coworkers and he said, well, have you hooked it up fiber optically? And I said, well, I don't have fiber optic Ethernet in my house. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. What do you mean? He said, you can convert the copper to fiber optic. Like, but will that matter? And he said, try it. So for a few parts, a couple of, SFP adapters, a fiber optic cable, and a little converter box, like $50 in parts, you take the copper, convert it to fiber optic, you plug it in the back of that unit, and the noise floor just goes boom. And it's interesting because you could have me listening to this unit and somebody said, well, do you hear that noise? And I'd be like, no, I don't hear anything. But once it's gone, you don't want it back. So that's a really strong advantage on that unit. So between those features, you get something that's very high performance and you're not paying for a DAC twice. Because something like a perfect example would be the Macintosh C53 behind us.
Right.
Has a DAC built in. I think it's a DA2 module now. And that's a great DA2 module. It sounds good. It has the Macintosh sound. So let's say you're a Macintosh fan, you like the Macintosh sound. If you use our transport with their DAC, you're still getting the Macintosh sound. You can also get external DACs, and we have one coming in November that's going to match the unit called an RD160. But you could have a favorite external DAC you really like, and you can just have our transport is the way to get information to it, and then the sound of the DAC will be the sound you like. But I've used the RS130 with very inexpensive integrated amplifiers that have DACs built in, and by very inexpensive, I mean under $2,000, and had ridiculously good results. It's such a good source. And as we all know from playing with audio equipment, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have a good source, you can't fix it later in the system. So you need to have the best source possible. And I really think the RS130, especially with that fiber optic input, I think you'd have to spend triple the money to get something that sounds as good.
If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot.
And click that bell icon so you can be notified of upcoming Gramophone content.
We've talked about how much fun it is to use an RS150B, or in this case an RS130, because of all the things you can do feature-wise, and you can do them either, again, from the app or from the front panel. Woody, maybe you can show us some of the favorites that you have in your time you've spent with this unit.
Well, if you scroll through here, you can see all the apps that are installed on this unit. It's much like an iPhone. When you get it, there'll be some things in here, like the clock is a native app, music is a native app. But when you want to add some things, you can go here and you can add title, and it comes through the Rose store, which is on here.
Same with Qobuz, of course.
Yep. So you've got in and out settings, you've got the Rose home, you've got CD ripping settings, and if you go to Rose store, and usually this is done in the initial setup. You'll pick Qobuz or Tidal, or if you want to have Rose FM, Apple Music, Rose Radio, there's all these things available from the Apple Store. The Rose Store. And you just download them, and then they'll end up on the unit. Then you enter your credentials that you have for those various apps, and then they're on the unit. And then once they're there, you can just access them by touching this, and it shows you music, and then you can do your playlists. Here's favorites, and then there's settings, purchases, all kinds of options here. And this can be done right from the front panel very easily. When you're done with that, you just go to the home, and then you can pick another app. So if you go to Tidal, and then let's say we pick this track,
Dire Streets,
and then select here, and this will show you the display. This is one of the really nice things about this unit, is that it has this big, beautiful display. So I always like it at trade shows because nobody asks you what song you're playing because it's got this big display, and like, oh, there it is. But it's also just nice to see the cover art. And if you don't want to display the cover art, this is another cool function. You can go to the VU mode, and you can display meters.
Now,
And
what if
these
you
are
have a
changeable.
Macintosh piece?
Oh, well, you could do that. Isn't that cool? So, and then you just go here if you want to go back to this display.
And if you've got your system hooked up to a flat panel,
Mm-hmm.
it will actually show this because you've got video out to the flat panel.
Yes. And the other thing is that if we go back to something where you're going to be using it more with a TV, that would be RoseTube.
Right.
And then this can be displayed on your TV. It has a 4K output. And you can, we were doing this earlier, we were doing a search, as we mentioned, Bruce Springsteen, Prove It All Night, Passaic. So if we go to this and we search for it, it'll search RoseTube, and then it finds it, and there's your concert. And that's the one you mentioned earlier, your favorite performance of this song, but you can't buy it. It's not on CD, it's not on video, it's not on Laserdisc. Now, mind you, this is a rough, grainy black and white recording, but it's the only one we got. But it's available.
Yeah.
And you can listen to it, and if you don't want to watch the video, that's fine. You can just use it for the audio portion of it.
Now, Woody, we mentioned the huge benefit of not having to have your YouTube content interrupted by commercials. How much do you have to pay each month for that service?
Free.
Ooh, free is always better than paid.
It's just included in RoseTube.
Yeah.
So there's no fee for that. So it's not like you have to buy YouTube Premium or anything. RoseTube just gets rid of all the commercials.
And again, it always defaults to the highest resolution performance of that. You can choose some other performance if you want, but it will default to the highest res.
Yeah. And you notice when we play it, no commercials, right?
Right.
It did not go to a commercial at all.
Right.
And any of these videos, they just pop right up. And some of them are done professionally, like this Paramore video. This is done by the band, so it's going to be top quality. It's not going to be something somebody ripped from a Laserdisc they have from 100 years ago. And this is where you would turn the TV on if you want to have this go to a display. And when that happens, this video goes to the monitor, and then you'll get something that looks kind of like the CD page. It'll show you what you're watching with a graphic. So the video plays on the TV or here, not at the same time.
Well, if you have other features you want to show us, that's great, but I think we've really done a good job of highlighting that it's not just the sonic performance of the Rose pieces, it's that all of them have all of these convenience features that make it easy and fun to interact with the unit. HiFi Rose makes some terrific sounding amplifiers that we've had some success with, and there's a brand new one, Woody, the RA280. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it because it is getting rave reviews now. And also then other things about your amp platform if you want to.
Well, all the amps are based on a new technology that's referred to as Class AD. It's a more updated version of Class D, and it uses gallium nitride instead of silicon to do the switching for the Class D part of the amplifier. And these amps typically sound more analog than the other Class D amps. And I don't want to generalize too much about Class D amplifiers, but I've never had one in my house I feel like I could live with long term. They're often kind of analytical and maybe a little dry sounding. And
lacking warmth.
yes, and while I wouldn't say that the gallium nitride amplifiers are necessarily warm, they're crazy neutral, which is something that's a really nice thing to have, especially if you like the rest of your system. because some people will flavor their system. They'll season it with a warmer sounding amp to make up for a brighter speaker, or things like that. But one thing I really like about the 280, it will tell me what other components sound like. And when we were doing an event recently with a pair of speakers from MoFi Electronics, it's like I knew what those speakers sounded like because I know how neutral the 280 is. It's the same thing with playing with other components. To me, that's what I really like about that product. It's also exceptionally powerful. We can play things without clipping, without distortion, in large rooms with wide dynamic swings. And there's a lot of amps that can do that, but they're considerably more expensive. And I don't know of anything in the $3,000 price point that performs like this. To me, it's kind of the things that are closest in performance are 2 to 3 times the price. And they're also a lot larger, and they're also hotter. So I'm a big fan of the 280, and the reviews really bear that out. We keep getting great reviews.
Yeah, to find an amplifier that is not crazy money, but has a very compact form factor, and as you say, because of its technology, it doesn't generate a lot of heat, but has a terrific ability to bring the dynamics, because when you're listening, especially with some of the classical pieces and so forth, having an amplifier that's got all that current in reserve and can really bring the dynamics is a great find. And every review I've seen so far talks about how the RA280, for the money that HiFi Rose is asking for it, is really a terrific value.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Class D amps were often very good in bass, and they would have that quick reaction to bass dynamics, but the mid-range often left me a little cold. And what's interesting about amplifiers, and this is almost something that's hard to quantify, but sometimes you just don't get an emotional connection to the music. And I can listen to some amplifiers and they can play something that usually moves me, that usually gets me emotional to hear it, and I'm left cold. And that's not something I can necessarily write out on paper what it did or didn't do right. But when an amplifier can do that, and it has these other advantages, moderate price point, not very big, doesn't run hot, doesn't use a ton of power, but I still get that emotional connection to the music, I'm like, now we've got something.
There you go. So is there anything else you want to share with us about the amplifiers, because you have other models as well?
Yes, there's a larger model called the 180, and that actually has 4 GaN-FET modules in it. So that allows you to do biamping, or you can run 2 pairs of speakers. There's a bunch of options on that one. That unit has many more features. It has many adjustments to the phono section, whereas it's just a simple moving magnet on the 180, on the 280. And the 180 also has a number of other EQ adjustments and things like that. It's a beautifully designed piece. It has this kind of cyberpunk aesthetic to it.
That's right.
And that's one thing that I really like about HiFi Rose across the board. They make very high performing products, but they're also very aesthetically pleasing and unique looking, because there's a lot of black boxes in this business. And sometimes if you walk into a showroom and you just see a black box with a blue display, you can't even tell what brand it is until you get up on it. And I think it's really nice that HiFi Rose wants to challenge the aesthetics of hi-fi equipment and do things that are appealing and draw the eye, whether it's a display or just the knobs and switches on the amplifiers. And our new DAC, when you see that, when that comes out in November, it's going to freak you out. It looks so cool.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the awesome RS520, because that has loads of power and all the streaming capabilities that we've talked about with your other streamers. It's truly an integrated piece.
Yeah, for some people, they might not want to have a bunch of separate components, and their system might be streaming based. They don't have a turntable. They might not have any other sources. So let's say they had a CD player as a source. They wouldn't really need that, because they could rip their CDs to the unit, and it could be an all-in-one unit. So you could have that in your bedroom, and with 200 watts of GaN-FET power, that'll drive most speakers. So yeah, that could be as simple as that, and that would probably make my wife very happy. Instead of all the components I have everywhere. So for a lot of people, that would be a perfect solution. Yeah. And with the GaN-FET sound quality, you're not really compromised as much as you would with a lot of the all-in-one boxes I've seen from streamers.
Right.
And it does have a good drive, so you're not limited on the speaker choices.
Yep. Well, Woody, we want to thank you for joining us and talking a little bit about HiFi Rose. And we want to thank you folks for watching this video. We'd really love to have you come to one of our 3 stores if you can. Visit us in Timonium, Columbia, or Gaithersburg, Maryland, because we'd love to play the new HiFi Rose equipment, but really other products in their line as well, because HiFi Rose has been such a pleasure for us to work with in terms of a manufacturer. You can also learn more about HiFi Rose and all of our fine brands at gramophone.com, and check out Sky by Gramophone, where we don't sell all of our products on Sky, but a lot of the products that we've talked about today you can get on Sky by Gramophone with a secure checkout, fast and free shipping, straight to your door. Joe Finn for Gramophone, once again thanking you for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.